Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So today we have Patrick Duffy with us, and Patrick is a economics person. He's worked for the U.S. News and Report. He's an economic specialist in real estate. So Patrick, it's great to have you. I just am curious how you ever got into this job other than you graduated from San Diego in economics.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today, Bruce. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of internships, and I was studying economics and minoring in communications at UC San Diego. And I had two internships. One was with the concert promoter, but that company was going out of business. So it was fun. I was concerted out for a while, but now I'm back to going shows. And then the second one was with a commercial and industrial real estate developer that was very successful. So that was a really good experience. I learned a lot, and I probably would have worked there after graduating, but they got sold to another company at the end of my internship. But it introduced me to a company called Market Profiles that became Market Point Realty Advisors in San Diego. That was a vendor of theirs, and it taught me about market research. And so my first job in the real estate industry really was working for Market Profiles down in San Diego. And I was down there for about 7 years before I went on to work for a home builder.
Oh, wow. And now, how did you get to where you are now? Same place?
I had bounced around. I'd worked for different consulting companies. I worked for Hanley Wood Market Intelligence, which then became Zonda. They track a lot of new home data points. And during the Great Recession, most of the consulting team got laid off because there wasn't a lot of work. And I became self-employed. So I've been kind of doing my own thing since June 2007. Really enjoy it because remote work for me can mean traveling. So I work remotely when I'm traveling, and I just have to deal with the time change and technology and things like that. And then I had been doing some work with Million Acres, which was a real estate offshoot of Motley Fool. And the guy had worked there. One of the people hired me. He was recruited by U.S. News and World Report, and he had to wait about a year before he could bring me on. And then he said, "Hey, you want to write for U.S. News? We have this brand new housing market index that tracks 50 plus US housing markets." And I started with them in 2022.
And you just mentioned that the hottest location or the hottest market right now is Omaha, Nebraska, which is fascinating. So maybe we can talk a little about that.
Who would have thunk? Yeah, it came out of nowhere. I talked to the Nebraska Examiner today about why is that? And I did 3 interviews. I like to interview local people to try to get their take on it. So it's not just the data we're looking at. And in that case, I talked to the current president of the Omaha Area Board of Realtors, and she's really involved in the state and national level, had her finger on the pulse of what's going on. I also talked to a home builder of Charleston Homes. They build semi-custom homes around the Omaha area. Mark Stadola, the CEO, the founder, has been doing it for like 30 years. And then I also spoke to the economic development person for the Omaha Chamber of Commerce. And what I came from these conversations was that there's a lot of collaboration going on there. There's a lot of people who work together, and it's slow and steady in Omaha. So they don't have like the highs and lows we have on the coasts. It's more slowly steady as she goes.
So what economic industries are growing Omaha?
Well, they have a big medical facilities that kind of related to the university system, and it's a lot of different things. Apparently, one of the problems, they've been so successful at recruiting companies that you have more. At some point, there's more job growth than population growth, and so they have 2 things they want to do. They want to retain people, and they want to bring people in. So it looks like they're doing pretty good at retaining people. And it's resilient. It's all sorts of different industries. And the person I talked to at the chamber said that's why they don't have the highs and lows in employment either, because they're diversified. So they have more resiliency because they're not over reliant on any industry. And they're smack dab in the middle of the country. And that's also probably a big benefit.
Yeah, they're right there on what I-80, and so that's probably a big turning point for a lot of things going through town. I take it you didn't get a chance to talk to Warren Buffett yet.
No, no, I should put a call into him and
I
see
think
if
you should.
what he
Yeah,
says. Like, you still have a house there. You could live anywhere in the world, um, perhaps on Mars someday. He's still
yeah,
around. But why Omaha? And there are probably a lot of different reasons for that. That's a good idea,
yeah. No, okay. We're going to have a second podcast to talk about your interview with Warren Buffett. Okay,
right?
that.
Specific to Omaha. Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned, my mother grew up in Omaha and went to school in Lincoln, and so uh, for I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a very common joke about the N on the helmet of the Nebraska football players. You don't know what that stands for?
No.
It stands for knowledge.
Okay.
So the Lincoln folks are pretty hilarious about this. So they are pretty self-deprecating and understand this very clearly.
That
But
Nebraska sense of humor.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It is very much a Nebraska sense of humor. So that is fascinating. So where in the U.S. are the other hot markets?
Austin, I think, was number two. They were tied with Kansas City as number one.
Oh,
We update this ranking every 6 months. And one of the things being on the West Coast, I'm in Long Beach, which is about 20 miles south of downtown Los Angeles, right on the ocean. I
hmm.
like to travel to other places like I do to other countries because the country's so big.
Oh
And
yeah.
I spent about a week visiting a friend in Kansas City and just had a blast. Went to a Chiefs game. Um,
Wow.
Bar hopping. It was around Halloween, so we did some Halloween stuff. And I'm kind of should now going to Omaha and maybe going for the College World Series, which I
Oh
was told is held there. I was
yeah.
also told that Lincoln, Nebraska gets a lot of students, not just from the at Lincoln, not just from the state, but from other states and from other countries. So
Oh,
it
interesting. Wow.
punches above its weight a little bit in that way.
So I assume you got some good barbecue when you were in Kansas City.
Oh yes, we went to three different places.
Yeah, everybody has to.
Did the whole
Absolutely.
tour.
So did you tour Austin also?
No, I've not been to Austin yet.
Yeah.
And I want to go. I was talking to some friends about going to South by Southwest next year
Oh, yeah.
and kind of spending some good time in Austin because I think I'd really enjoy the city.
Yeah. So, okay, so the housing market in general is pretty good. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it's still stuck because you have the lock-in effect of people with low interest rates. People are starting to get used to higher mortgage rates, and maybe they are hoping for lower mortgage rates in the future, but maybe not as quickly as they hoped. And refinancings are also up a lot. You know, rates are still high, but they're, I think, about 20 basis points lower than they were a year ago. I do have a question on these people who are refinancing. How many of them are pulling cash out, and are they pulling cash out to pay off debt because of these years of
Oh,
inflation?
oh, that's interesting. Pulling cash out when rates were low.
Well, now they're pulling out when the rates are even higher, you know,
Oh,
than they were a few years ago. And is that out of necessity? Are they reinvesting in their homes? Are they paying for college tuition? Are they paying off credit card debt? Because credit card debt's going to
right.
a record high now. Delinquency rates have been ticking up. So I think people at the lower income levels are kind of struggling more. FHA delinquency rates are a little higher. They're a lot higher than for conforming loans. So I'm looking at all these sorts of different indicators. I think the moderate and higher income households are doing much better for now. It's the lower income ones because they're more exposed to inflation.
Well, and then as we talked earlier, the tariffs just came out today, so that's going to be an interesting uh, glitch in what's happening in Detroit in particular.
Oh, absolutely. 25%. And I grew up when you had to drive those not so great American cars of the 70s. And then some of the imports came in and they were better. And they
Yeah,
forced Detroit to up its game. Now,
right,
American made cars today are really good. So I'm
right.
hoping that should these prove more permanent, you know, they'll still want to be competitive and provide, you know, really good cars. But that's certainly going to hurt Detroit. I also read that the average car crosses the Canadian border back and forth 7 or 8 times because of different
Really?
parts. Yeah, so it's just going to be very messy.
Oh, oh, I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it. So parts in general coming from Canada are going to be much more expensive.
Yeah, going back and forth because they get different components as a car's getting built. And then, I once had an Audi, and then everything was so expensive to fix. And now I have an American made car, and I don't worry about parts and things like that because
Right.
it doesn't have to cross the border. So we'll see if that's still in effect a week from now or a month from now. Maybe this is a negotiating tactic. Um, we'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, certainly the indecision or insecurity of knowing what's going to happen is certainly having an effect on a lot of people and a lot of companies trying to figure out what their projections are going to be.
Yeah, there was a CNBC survey of CFOs out today, and it was saying 75% of them expect a recession at the
Wow.
end of 2025, early 2026. They don't expect it to be a substantial one. They expect it to be mild to moderate. But the one thing they mention is the uncertainty. And that comes on the heels of consumer sentiment from the conference board also falling. And again, it's people looking ahead and kind of not knowing what to predict. And if you don't know what your financial situation is going to be, you're probably not going to go out to that restaurant or get that special cocktail at that bar. You might go for a draft beer. You might not go at all. So there tends to be a lag time in between these changes until it shows up in the data.
Right,
So for
right.
now, I kind of just look at anecdotes. I talk to people. What are they doing?
Well, so that brings me to the question of retail. Retail to date has been pretty hot in terms of commercial retail. Everybody was expanding for a while. Do you think that's going to start contracting now?
I think retail's gone through an interesting. It's kind of like what's coming out in the wash. So you see, like Forever 21 going bankrupt, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
and what used to be Pick and Save, and now Family Dollar thing is selling off one of their chains. So I
Right.
think you're having a lot of sort of people trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work in retail. I did a article for U.S. News about the commercial real estate sectors and did some great interviews. And what I found out from the retail sector, it kind of depends on how good are you at combining on-site and then online sales. And are you doing events?
Ah,
Are you making it exciting? Because here in the US, we don't have our online share of sales is stuck around just below 20%. In China, it's 50%.
whoa.
In the
Wow.
UK, it's even like more like 30%. So why is it so much higher in the US? And I was told two reasons. One is that people still don't trust putting their credit card information
Ah,
online. That's slowly getting better. But I also think that people in the United States really see retail spending as a form of entertainment.
right.
And so a
Right.
lot of retailers are saying, well, what can we do to bring them in? So more experiential retail. I know a lot of malls are doing that. But if you're not able to pivot in time, or Forever 21, maybe the fast fashion just had its turn, and then people look at like the environmental impacts of that,
Right.
and maybe they don't need that shirt that lasts three times. So I think it depends. Is retail able to pivot? But overall, versus the other commercial real estate sectors, I think retail is actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if you have the same kind of thing happening in Southern California, but uh, the small downtown retail areas, like in our area, San Mateo, Burlingame, Palo Alto, those downtown areas, those smaller downtown areas that are not big mall settings, seem to be doing pretty well. People, as you say, they seem to be coming for entertainment more than kind of shopping per se. So the big shopping centers seem to be struggling a little bit, but the smaller retail locations in downtown seem to, at least from my vantage point, seem to be doing pretty well.
It depends where they're at. Like the Century City Mall's doing pretty well. It's in Century
Oh,
City,
okay.
and they spent a lot of money to redevelop it. Um, Newport Coast, Newport Beach, you have like Fashion Island. I think some of those are doing better. But if you're doing like the traditional suburban mall and you haven't updated the excitement of getting people in, you're going to struggle more. Some people used to go to the movies. And so that gives them
Right.
an excuse to go through the mall. Well, now movie attendance is down and they're not having a great start to the year from what I've read either.
Yeah, no. So that then leads us to industrial and office, and maybe you can talk a little bit about those sectors.
Well, it's interesting. I looked up the return to office. So there's this big fight. Okay, so during the pandemic, employers said, "Hey, you can work from home forever." Asterisk, which means until it changes in our favor, and then we want you back. So now there's this sort of split between those who allow them to do the hybrid work, sometimes in the office, sometimes at home, and it's about 3 days. Workers want about 3 days at home, but employers want two. So they're off about half a day. And so it looks like employers want people in their office. 75% of workers have to go into the office at least a couple of days a week. Some of them full time, some of them part time. And so that's actually helped occupancy levels a little bit. It's not where it was in San Francisco. It's improving, but it's still, I think it's 44%. I think San Jose, Silicon Valley is 52%. The national average is a little higher than that. I think it was 55% in New York. It's a lot higher in Texas, like Austin and Houston.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were always higher. They were like over 60%. So we're going to see where this shakes out. You keep seeing these releases from Amazon and Chase, like we want you in here 5 days a week. And I can see some of the advantages of that. If you're a young employee, you want to be in there. You want the mentoring, you want the networking. If you're training people, you need to be there. But if you're kind of like what I do, I don't know if there's a huge advantage to being in the office.
No. Did you ever have an office, or you work strictly out of the house?
I think I've been remote first since 2007. Well, Hanley Wood, when I worked for them, were really good about allowing me to work from home. I'd go into the office on occasion. So,
yeah. So it was a nice transition. You never really had to do that very much.
I've been doing it since 2000. So
it's worked out well.
It is. Yeah. I save a lot of money in commuting costs and clothes and lunches and all that sort of stuff. It's not for everyone. There are some times I wish you could go out and collaborate with people, but I get out socially a lot, so it works out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting point to bring out, that some people prefer to actually be in an office and collaborate in an office and see people eye to eye, and other people would just soon work off of Zoom or work remotely from home. It just kind of depends. I know our son was working for Salesforce, and I forget what their numbers are, but they now are trying to get people back in the office because they have huge vacancies in that Salesforce Tower building. And then he went to work for Stripe, and he has to now come in 3 days a week for Stripe. And he seems to think that works pretty well for him. So anyway, it's an interesting new world out there.
That's pretty standard, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
If I was young, like your son, starting out in my career, kind of getting new connections, I would probably be fine with 3 days a week. They don't typically like them to do working from home on Fridays or Mondays, because that turns into a long weekend. They think, oh, you're not working at home if it's one of these days. So.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but you're probably right. Yeah, Friday or Monday, they're thinking, yeah, you're not really working. You may say you're working, but you're not necessarily sitting at a desk working. So
right, but there's but there's also a downside. Like, I will work some weekends depending if there's a lot going on. Like I work with clients in home building, and I do PR work as well as economic consulting, because I can pull all the stats together. And we had sort of a PR emergency on Friday with one client, and so I had to work on it over the weekend in order to get a draft to them, because we need other approvals before we send it out. It was pretty time intensive. But in exchange, I could take a Wednesday off. Like, for example, I could take today. So, there are upsides and downsides, but when you work remotely a lot, you learn over time how to carve out those, separations.
So what do you think about the industrial market these days?
I think it depends where it's located. I think overall people have been pretty good about holding on new builds. However, there's a big split between the technology. If you have an old place with low ceilings and you can't adapt to the new way of e-commerce, you're going to have to rehab it, or you're going to get R&D or smaller companies or traditional assembly. It depends where you're at. it's interesting how the technology is changing in land use down to that level.
Well, speaking of which, are you tracking biotech
As a specific
sector?
sector, I saw something about it earlier, but not as much.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a big sector up here in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and we have recently had some people talk to us about that particular sector, which, they're actually struggling right now. There was this huge move forward to build a lot of biotech up here, and now I think they've all overbuilt. And so the sector is just not moving forward right now. And of course, development in general, I don't know if you can talk about that sector, but developers can't do much right now because interest rates are so high. But
Yeah, it's really hard for it's hard for them to refinance. There'll be a difference in cap rates on what buyers want and sellers want. A lot of it's negotiation. The extended pretend continues. I read an article, is that nearing its end? I've been reading that headline for several years. It depends. A lot of, if I'm Chase Bank and I want people back in the office, well, I also own a lot of commercial real estate or have that on my books. So there's this other reason to want to have people come back.
right. Are you tracking at all the rent to own market? Do you know that market at all?
For residential?
Yeah, yeah. Instead of a developer doing, typical single family sales, they will build a bunch of smaller units and just rent them out.
Well, there's build to rent.
Build to rent. Yeah.
That's huge. That's really developing a lot.
Yeah.
Mostly in the South that we're
Right.
seeing that, but it offers people a single family type experience, and growing a family in a yard and to be able to hopefully save for a home of their own, versus living in an apartment. Some people look at apartments as sort of like what you do when you're younger. And then when you're older and you start having kids or a couple dogs, it's time to like move out to the suburbs and get a yard. And then a single family home tends to fit that.
Right. So you start with the rental and the smaller rental home that's not really on a separate parcel, but sort of on a separate parcel, and then move into your own house later on if you can. So
Yeah, and like, if you rented let's say you had a 3-bedroom condo and a 3-bedroom house, you're going to get substantially more for the 3-bedroom house, even if there's the same square footage. Even if the condo has a pool and a spa. Well, actually, these build-to-rent communities often have those same kind of community amenities.
That's true. Yeah, they've got the pool and so forth. Yeah.
They do risk a little bit of overbuilding because people tend to get really excited when they run into an asset class. So I think they're starting to monitor that to make sure they'll get ahead of their skis on this.
Yeah, and I think I've heard there's some kind of horror stories on property management where you can't get any kind of service to help fix your problem in your house or whatever. But I'm sure that's true of any particular sector. There's going to be problems with property management depending on the situation.
It's very, very hard. I've been a landlord and I've managed myself and hired property manager. It is challenging to find a really good property manager everywhere. And then from their point of view, it's kind of a thankless job every day. You're just solving problems all day.
Yeah, no, we manage a small portfolio of buildings, and as you say, it's just painful to have to go every day and fix the toilets or whatever is happening. So, and you don't always have a handyman or somebody that can go and do this. So,
it's a little bit easier for commercial than for residential, from what I hear in terms of management.
Right.
Maybe people aren't as emotional when they're at their home.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they tend to be a little bit more fussy and so forth. But anyway, well, so what's your sort of long-term or short-term prognosis for the future of commercial real estate in the U.S.?
A lot of that depends on what's going on with the economy and interest rates and tariffs. And, this CFO survey that I saw, a lot of them are saying, hey, the president's doing what he promised in his campaign, but we just don't like the way he's doing it. It's a little chaotic. So that's sort of a question mark until we find out what's going to happen with these tariffs, because when you start tariffs, you can't assume that other countries are going to like not change their behavior. That's why I like economics. It's a study of incentives, and incentives change when things change. If you change one part of the equation, people are going to react differently, and that's where I see reciprocal tariffs. So this tit for tat doesn't end well in the long run. So it's kind of an experiment we're all living through in real time, and it makes it hard to sort of predict what's going on. I know with uncertainty with consumers that they may pull back on higher cost items or trips, but when it comes to buying homes, that's different because that's stability. If they can afford that payment, so they may not buy that new expensive car or new electronics, but home's different because it stabilizes their housing costs.
They want that home, so that stabilizes them long term. Interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. I think that's very, very true. So just out of curiosity, what's your favorite sandwich? We'll end with that.
Oh, wow. You know what? I make myself a wonderful tuna melt and a salmon melt.
Oh, wow. Okay. What kind of cheese?
It mix on the cheese. I get a cheese mix. And so it's a cheese mix of different types of grated cheese and kind of lower fat mayo and really good bread and little hot sauce to kind of make it more interesting.
Gotta have the hot sauce for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll do that for a little treat. I'm a sandwich person. So you name a sandwich, I'm probably going to like it. But I may make that tonight. So that sort of popped into my head. It's a good question.
So, that's cool. And who in the world, alive and dead, might you want to sit with your tuna melt and eat and talk to?
Oh, I'd love to sit with Jesus Christ. I would just to pepper him with questions. I've been to Israel.
So many questions. Yeah.
I've walked the stations of the cross in Jerusalem. It's
nice.
All fascinating, just the history. So I'd want to talk to him.
Have you listened at all to Father Gregory Boyle? He's an LA guy with Homeboys.
I know about him. Yeah, I know about him. Yeah, he's very famous down here.
Jesuit priest. Anyway, very interesting character. You might want to read his book or whatever. So fun.
I'll add that to the list.
Yeah, it's good. All right. Well, we will end with that. It was great to have you on. Where can people get a hold of you?
You can check me out on LinkedIn. Search for Metro Intelligence or Patrick S. Duffy, S as in Sean, my middle name. You can also visit the website, metrointel.com, or send me an email, pduffy@metrointel, metrointel.com. But most of the people contact me through LinkedIn. I get all sorts of. Cool. That's how you found me.
It is. LinkedIn is a great platform to work off of, no doubt about it. So it's fantastic. Well, we will end with that. It was great to have you. I think we may have to do another podcast in 6 months to see how this prognosis or how the market is doing. So we'll just have to check in.
Well, even earlier than that, I'm going to do an update to my 5-year housing market forecast. I'm the one that's crazy enough to kind of predict out 5 years. And so I'll be updating that probably July, sometime over the summer.
All right. Well, ping me and we'll get back on and work through that. And it'll be a very interesting look at 5 years ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. If the Federal Reserve has trouble predicting, it makes it kind of tough for all of us. They got 500 economists there, though. So, it's not.
Yeah, but they don't have you, right?
No. They just have me and other commenters to tell them if they got it wrong or right.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.